Yo, Alex here. This is the OnePlus Ace 3, the Chinese variant of the OnePlus 12R. I'll try to keep this short since the phone has been out for quite some time now. First of all, the thing that makes the OnePlus Ace 3 stand out against its competitors in the same price range is its build quality, design and hardware. The metal and glass construction feels solid, the design looks good to me, and it's using hardware that you usually don't see on devices in this price range, like the more expensive ultra-thin optical fingerprint sensor that can be placed at a higher position, using Gorilla Glass Victus 2 to protect the screen, and using an LTPO panel that can go as low as 1Hz and as high as 120Hz. And talking about the display, it is a really good quality panel with 1.5K resolution, very good brightness for outdoor usage, fast touch response for gaming, and high frequency PWM dimming in low brightness. The PWM dimming is great for me since I'm a little more sensitive to low frequency PWM dimming these days. The only thing I'm not the biggest fan of is the curved edges. While it does make the phone nicer to hold and gestures easier to use, the curved edges look more distracting to me, and it's a pain to find screen protectors for curved displays. The software here is probably worth a mention since this is the first time I'm using the CN version of ColorOS. For the most part, the UI is similar to the global version of ColorOS and OxygenOS, just with a lot more features, customization options, and services built in. The setup process does take a bit more time since on top of the usual stuff like making sure auto launch is on so that I don't miss notifications from the apps I use, turning off features that I don't use, removing apps that I don't need, and manually installing the Play Store. This process is a little bit more troublesome compared to HyperOS and OriginOS, but this is just during the setup of course, and after that, the experience is just like most other Android phones. In fact, putting aside the longer setup process, I probably prefer CN ColorOS over the global version since it has more customization options as well as more control over app permissions. Anyway, it has basic Google services built in like most Chinese phones these days, so no issues with banking apps or whatsoever. Just that as usual, Google Location History and Android Auto probably wouldn't work. Oh, and while this isn't specific to CN ColorOS, I like that they now have the option to unlock the phone with the fingerprint sensor even when the screen is off. This is something that other brands have been doing for a while now, and it's nice to finally have it on Oppo and OnePlus devices. As someone who enjoys playing Genshin, I was curious about whether the additional optimization that they mentioned on their CN website works for the global client for Genshin or not, and after counting the pixels, the answer is not. Loading times doesn't feel any faster either, and it's still slightly slower compared to my iPhone. But on the bright side, some of the other gaming features do seem to work, like Frame Booster, Super Resolution, and Hyper HDR. I don't care much for the rest, but Super Resolution works well enough at least. It's mostly just boosting the sharpness, but it does look quite nice. I was actually hoping that I might be able to reduce the battery drain and heat by playing the game at lower graphic settings and then use Super Resolution to make it look better. But after some tests, I had to drop all the graphic settings to medium with Super Resolution on just to match the amount of heat and battery drain from playing the game normally at the highest graphic settings. It's kinda pointless to go any lower since it would just look worse, so this is probably a mode for folks who are willing to play the game with a phone cooler. Anyway, while it's a little disappointing that Genshin can't run at 810p on the Ace 3, it does have a mode which lets the game run at the screen's native resolution. It seems to be limited to 30fps and will heat up the phone quickly of course, but it is still a nice option to have for taking higher resolution screenshots. And since we're talking about Genshin already, might as well talk about how it performs too. Like the OnePlus 11, it seems to be quite willing to let the phone run warmer in order to maintain a higher and more consistent FPS. I'm not going to use Perf Dock since that's crazy expensive, but just based on my own experience, aside from some minor stutters when there are a lot of skill effects going on, which doesn't affect gaming experience much, it's able to mostly maintain 55 to 60 FPS during my regular 30 minutes test at the highest graphic settings, which is pretty good. But the phone did get quite hot to the touch, especially on the screen itself and the frame. So again, I'll recommend using a phone cooler if you want to play at these graphic settings. Personally, I find it a bit too troublesome, so I prefer to just have a small fan blowing towards the back of the phone and dropping the graphic settings a little so that the phone doesn't heat up too much. This performance is more or less in line with my experience on the OnePlus 11. For Honkai Star Rail, I'm not going to bother testing the highest possible graphics since even the 8 Gen 3 wouldn't be able to maintain 60fps, but HSR is a game that becomes drastically less demanding if you just lower the graphics a little. At high resolution with everything set to medium, the phone would only get a little bit warm after 30 minutes of gameplay, consuming just around 12% of battery. Anyway, needless to say, with this level of performance coupled with a 5500 mAh battery, day-to-day usage isn't going to be a problem here at all. For camera performance, pretty much only the main camera is decent, since the ultra-wide angle camera falls apart quickly in low light, and the 2-megapixel macro camera is basically useless. Anyway, I like that they now have an easy way to adjust the exposure, since in daytime, the camera tends to prefer going for a really high exposure for some reason. This is especially useful for the front-facing camera. But the annoying thing is, if you have the EV adjustment turned on in low light, auto night mode doesn't seem to kick in, so you might end up with shots that are too dark. Also, there is still no Pro Video mode here for some reason, and the front camera is still limited to 1080p 30fps. Anyway, I'll just show some camera samples here, and you can see for yourself whether it's good enough for your needs. Overall, at the prices that the phone is going for in China these days, it's a pretty solid mid-range option, especially for those who care a bit more about design and build quality. It's probably also a bit more value for money compared to those new devices that just came out, like the Redmi Turbo 3, Realme GT Neo 6 SE, and even their own Ace 3V. For just a little bit more money, the Ace 3 comes with noticeably better build quality, it likely has better hardware internally in areas like the fingerprint sensor, GPS and whatnot, and the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is still a bit more powerful compared to even the 8S Gen 3, at least on paper. And keep in mind that since the Ace 3 has been in the market for a bit longer, it might get more discounts during sales, so the price difference might actually be smaller. Anyway, if I had more budget, I would still go for the Redmi K70 Pro instead, since it not only performs better in Genshin thanks to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, it can run the game at 864p, which is a noticeable upgrade over 720p, it has a flat screen which I prefer, HyperOS which I like a bit better, and it has better camera hardware. But if you're on a tighter budget, the Ace 3 is probably one of the more balanced options around when it comes to performance, design and hardware, which makes it a pretty easy recommendation if you don't have any specific needs. But before I end this video, do take note that this is specifically talking about the Ace 3 and not the 12R. On top of the insane price markups, they took out the charger and case for the 12R, and they even nerfed the storage from UFS 4.0 to 3.1 for some reason. At the price that they're selling the phone here in Singapore, you're better off topping up a little more and getting an S23 Plus from local shops, or an iQOO 12 with the latest chip from Malaysia. I'm sure that if the pricing was a lot lower, the 12R would still be a pretty nice option despite all that. But yeah, I just think that the pricing makes no sense in this current market.